Okay, so this is going to be a quick demo on how to use the group functionality in an assembly. So here I've got my assembly and my part studio. I'm just going to insert all of my parts, and notice I'm not clicking into the actual assembly yet. And you can see when I'm inserting these parts together, they come in as they were relative to each other within the part studio. So this is how they're catted in the part studio, and they're together like this. But then once I'm in here, I can obviously drag my parts around. Now I can save a step here by grouping the parts together. Grouping basically just fixes the parts relative to each other. And this is useful because instead of having to mate all these parts together, is I, I can insert basically the part studio as a singular group that's already been quote unquote pre-mated together. And another neat thing about this is if I were to change this gusset right here, I move it all the way over here and it's just like this now, is previously if I had mated this together in the assembly without using the group, this gusset right here either would give you an error because there's new geometry on it, and B, it would not be in the same location as it is in the part studio. And so by grouping, you can see it keeps everything relative to each other as it was in the part studio, which can save you some time here. Change the gusset back. And another thing about that too is making sure I have intelligent origins. So I have this mate connector right here in the part studio that's at the origin and connected to this drive rail right here. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to use the same origin that I'm using in my part studio as the origin of my assembly. So just like this, I'm able to keep the same origin that I have in the part studio as the assembly. So what this allows me to do is if I were to change, any of the, dimensions in here, say I made my frame 30 inches wide instead, the origin of the part studio, obviously it updates first. So my origin is because I sketched my frame based on the origin in the part studio, and I have this mate connector that's in the center of the part studio. What that's going to do is in my assembly, my origin is still going to stay right there in the middle. Now, if I had done a different type of mate here, so if I had instead simply mated, this to be like say 10 inches away from the origin here, if I changed my frame sizing, my origin of the assembly wouldn't update. So that's why it's really important to make sure your assembly origins and your part studio origins, they match, so that any changes you make in your part studio are reflected correctly in your assembly.